This time on the Real Generation Gap.
It bothers me that we have a culture like this.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a little bit why I'm disappointed. She's one of the greatest actresses in like film history, and
we had a decade of untested people.
The problems that we have are no longer about survival. The problems that we have are now about our comfort.
That's what a bureaucrat would do for you. You hire a lawyer, they won't do anything for you.
Hi, welcome to the Real Generation Gap. I'm BJ Kang.
I'm Fred Satilli.
And the movie we're reviewing today is Defending Your Life, Apathy in the Seinfeld Era. A young yuppie suddenly dies and finds himself in a trial in the afterlife, having to defend the decisions he made on Earth. But in the midst of the proceedings, meets a girl and falls in love, who challenges him to overcome his mortal fears.
Nice synopsis, BJ.
Thanks.
Yeah, I guess that's the idea of overcoming your fear. The point is he goes to like a purgatory. It's not in heaven,
yeah.
But they're going to evaluate. They tell him that you live many lives, so reincarnation is. They tell you that this is what happens.
Yeah.
They say, if you didn't conquer your fears during your life, you go back to Earth and you face your fears again. So we're going to defend your decisions. Why did you do this and why did you do that? You make a case for yourself so that you can transcend. One of the hooks is, they said, you as a mortal human, you really only think with 3% of your brain. You're only using 3% of your brain power.
Yeah. Whereas
I, the bureaucrat who works for the universe, so apparently the universe is a giant bureaucracy, right? And I work for the universe, and I and another, an antagonistic representative.
Yeah, the prosecutor.
Are going to, they make it into a court thing, but it's not really a court, but you're going to be shown scenes from your life, and you're going to have to say why you did what you did, or, or why were you afraid? Why were you afraid to do the right thing, or why did you tell a fib, or whatever it may be? So he has to defend his life, and he's going to do this for 9 days. I really like this movie. I think it's very funny.
Yeah.
But I was a huge Seinfeld fan, and Seinfeld was very funny. It was comedic genius, really. But it was something that could only happen in a certain time in history. During the 90s, this was made in 91, Seinfeld started in 89, so Seinfeld had really set the tone for an apathetic lifestyle. All of his episodes were like, someone didn't return your call, and now we have to decide whether we're going to call them back or not. And they would do like a half an hour discussing it amongst themselves, and various scenarios and variables would come. It was the problem was minuscule. It wasn't like, well, you got a notice for the draft, and now you're going to have to go to war. You're going to face a war.
Yeah. And
you're going to ask your girlfriend to wait for you while you're in war. And she's going to, oh, Johnny, come back alive. This was a decade of people who were completely untested by life. This guy had an extremely mundane life. Oh, yeah, these are the two, the defender and the antagonist. Anyway.
Rip Torn, I believe is his name.
Right, Rip Torn. He did a great job of being the bureaucrat, and she did a great job of being like the nasty prosecutor.
Yeah.
She was kind of a mean lady. And, it's... the actress is Lee Grant, and Lee Grant is really my kind of girl. I find her quite beautiful. I guess she's about 60 at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at her, and I thought she looked like she had bad plastic surgery. I don't know if it was just bad makeup, but it was like, wow, all that time ago, bad plastic surgery. But anyway, she's got fabulous cheekbones.
Yeah.
But she seemed like a little too tight, So it kind of was distracting for me. But my point here in talking about this entire decade, we had a decade of untested people who their biggest trial in life was like bad phone reception or, slow computer uploading. I mean, nobody during that time was faced with any big trials. There's a whole generation of people who they never missed a meal in their life. They were never cold a day in their life. They might have had a personal thing, maybe the death of a parent or the death of a pet, but it wasn't a trial for them. It wasn't a generation that was tested. In the past, there were generations of people who they had to fight for their meals. They worked hard for, years and years. Immigrants that came over, without a dime, when they were cold and starving and wearing shoes with holes in the bottom. These are people who never even had old clothes.
Yeah.
Brand new everything, go to the mall. This guy, he got a brand new car, and that's how he killed himself. He drove in traffic in a new car, and he was fidgeting with a CD. He had a CD player. There were people that had cars that didn't have air conditioning, but not this generation. And Seinfeld really, really did a good job for 10 years of 180 episodes of completely irrelevant themes. Now, they were hilarious, and their execution was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing here. The movie was very, very funny. But it was a movie where people were saying, well, you have to face your fear. But he had a lifetime without fear. He wasn't afraid of anything.
Yeah.
There was no challenges for him. And I was glad to have an opportunity to show you this. I don't know what your generation is going to face. A year from now, we could be in a terrible... You could be drafted. You could be.
Possibly.
I mean, we have, war in Europe again. We have war in Asia now. Sound familiar? I heard one guy on the news actually say, well, we may have to arm Germany in case they have to march through Poland and attack Russia.
Yeah.
And I said, did this guy actually say this? Wasn't it like 1939 or something? We did this already. Didn't work out good, right?
Yeah.
But people don't want to learn from history. So really funny movie. But I feel that society has actually gone from the apathy of the 90s to the nihilism of now. Mm-hmm. Now we actually have fear, don't we?
Yeah.
Everybody's even afraid to read the wrong newspaper. You go on the internet and, if I go in this site, will I be on a list somewhere? And will the government be after me? Who's watching me? Who's taking is AI evaluating everything I do? People are afraid to do anything. They're afraid to be found out for what they are, even if they're not bad. They assign bad things to you. You could be somewhere on a sightseeing tour. Were you in this town on this day? You're going to be, harassed to death and maybe jailed or, and then where will they do that?
Yeah.
Where will they do this horrible stuff to you? In the apathetic, bureaucratic court. So this guy's being represented by two people who didn't care about anything. Mm-hmm. They had no skin in the game, very casual about the whole thing, and that's what you get.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't, life now doesn't make sense. The thing, you can't learn the right thing to do and do it and be a success. You can do the right thing and fail, and you can be a total criminal and be totally fine.
That's a good point. I was just reading this book called, I believe it's by Mark Ronson. It's a very popular self-help book. I was reading it. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving Enough. And he brings up that a point, and the point that where we are in society is that we're just so, the problems that we have are no longer about survival. The problems that we have are now about our comfort, because we have first world problems. Now we care about, how many likes that we get on certain social media posts, or, what car you're driving, and if you're going to say something that might get you a little in trouble at work, while people in other countries are thinking, am I going to eat today? Or,
they have dysentery.
Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, you have your not favorite airplane seat as you're flying to Europe.
And honestly, it brings up a good point that, kind of that he's being held on trial in this afterlife. It's like if you live in a society in which there's nothing but an abundance of comfort and commodity and resources, the fact that you really have, anything to be afraid of is a crime that you probably should be held on trial for. Especially if you let your life be ruled by it and you live in a life of comfort such as that.
And a life of apathy. So if you have all these resources, do something good. Yeah. You devote yourself to something. You don't have to worry about food or shelter. Holy mackerel.
This movie definitely comes out of the era that it's from, which is the 1990s. Around this time, I think there's a lot of movies where the movies are no longer so much about these big adventures, but now about overcoming these obstacles within yourself instead of overcoming these external obstacles. And they're often done a lot through being in a different world or being traveling to a different world. For example, like this movie kind of reminded me of The Truman Show a little bit, in which it's, one's man internal struggle, finding out which is brought up when he's in a world that's not the real world or the world that he is supposed to be, or Pleasantville, which is with Tobey Maguire, which is where he gets transferred to a TV show, and all of a sudden his problems that he had in real life just don't seem as important once he gets a bigger perspective. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because it's like these problems came up because of the materialism and the excess that came from, this era. This was the era of the yuppie where, capitalism was doing the best it ever done and everyone was producing. And,
they called it the me generation.
Yeah.
You're used to Zoomers and Boomers, but that was, the me generation.
Me.
People had meaningless jobs, Most people I know, many people I know, they have no skills.
Yeah.
They don't really know how to do anything. I have a very successful friend, works for a news company. She's an international business news copy editor. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't know how to do anything. She doesn't play any sports, doesn't play a musical instrument, doesn't have any real, the art on her walls is not her own. Not an especially good cook, not an especially good, that's a wasted life.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
It's like a wasted decade.
That's sort of a thing that's brought up. You begin to see this in early to late 1990s movies, and then you even really see the really height of the critique of that sort of culture and there's another aspect that sort of reminded me, the sort of critique of that yuppie culture, of that just the focus on excess and material goods, like in American Psycho specifically. And I thought that was a part that was very reminiscent of it. But another aspect of the movie that I really liked was that there was a lot of comedy around that,
Oh, totally, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because you're in the afterlife and you would assume that it's above the things that we have here, that it's more.
Right.
But a lot of the comedy comes from it. A lot of the comedy comes from it where it's like, it's a little bit more similar to life than you think it is. Like when he gets off the tram and he tries to tip the bellhop, and he's kind of struggling for in his pocket. That's really
he doesn't
funny.
have anything.
He doesn't have any
dead.
money.
He's dead.
He still has those material thoughts. Or when he goes to a comedy club and the stand-up comedian starts singing "That's Life" by Frank Sinatra.
Right, but that's death.
Yeah,
yeah, and it was so great that was the worst comedian of all time.
Oh yeah,
you have to give it to that actor for portraying the ultimate lounge lizard.
Yeah,
not that what he was saying was funny at all, but yet he pressed on, and Albert Brooks had a lot of good one-liners.
Yeah,
and then lo and behold, he's in this, what I call a convention setting, right? When you go to a hotel and you don't have your own car and your schedule is real loose, you almost invariably meet somebody that you connect with.
Yeah.
I've been to conventions and it's people pair up right away. This man and this woman, they might be married at home, but at this convention, they're together.
Yeah.
So in one day, he meets the Meryl Streep, who was quite beautiful at that time, and he's enraptured with her, and she, for some reason, just adores him, and they're going to have 4 days, because her trial is 4 days, his trial is 9 days. Mm-hmm. She's appears to be more virtuous, but she's there nonetheless. And one friend of mine who also really liked this movie, her view on this situation was that this was a movie about overcoming your fear, or facing your fear, or acknowledging your fear. And so they both had to do this, but they didn't have anything to be afraid of. And Meryl Streep she didn't do some terrible thing or have some terrible thing hanging over her. She had a beautiful suburban life. She had a beautiful daughter. And she happened to fall in the backyard over lawn furniture, hit her head on the concrete, and roll into the swimming pool. Right? So they both had accidental death. And there they are facing each other.
Yeah.
And they're going to be, in a few days, they're going to be returned to the earth. Mm-hmm. Right? Because they didn't do a sufficient job of facing their fear while on Earth. Now, if you are that guy and you couldn't face your fear and you had this few trials, I'm telling you, this really bothers me, this untested people. There are these untested, like these Karens, right? They got that expression now, the Karens?
Yeah.
Right, just entitled people. People they've never had a challenge in their life. Just whatever they wanted from the minute they got up to the minute they went to bed. It bothers me that we have a culture like this.
Yeah.
And the transition of what happened in society is interesting. We had a very apathetic decade, the 90s. And then little by little, the government instilled more and more and more fear. They even released a pandemic, right? The news got worse and worse. Everything got worse and worse. Gun violence and racial strife. These things were not a problem in the 90s. I was there.
I don't know about that. You definitely had a lot of things like that in the 90s. I mean, you had that whole panic over going postal, with the postal workers.
Society wasn't worried about that. It was a joke. We had a few postal workers that shot up the place, right?
It was a bit of a worry, and you had,
Believe me, it was not a worry. It was a joke. It was a tagline. Going postal was the expression.
You had wars in the 90s as well. You still had gun violence in the 90s, I believe.
Yeah, but it wasn't like now. The fear factor wasn't there. That was a time that back in the 70s and 80s, people were still working hard to be successful. Mm-hmm. There weren't people that were just automatically successful. You still had to know what you were doing and do something, and society was very, very different. Now, the amount of fear now in society that the government has systematically instilled into society. First, they made you completely apathetic so you didn't care. Before that, people cared. They worked, right?
Yeah.
And they had a decade where really nobody really had to work. They didn't care. Everything was, everybody was an insurance salesman or some other, a realtor, some completely unimportant, just a mid-level agency thing. There were chemical engineers and electrical engineers, making inventions, but by and large, society as a rule was very apathetic about their future. And then these fear factors, they even had a TV show called Fear Factor. Not really anything to do with this, but just happened to come to mind. But anyway, now, I'll point it out this way. At that time, comedy was wide open. You could say or do anything. These comedians were off the chain. Now they're restricted. Now there's all this compelled speech and forbidden speech. You could never do these comedy acts. You get a guy like Larry the Cable Guy. If he just came out now, it'd be socially unacceptable. But back then it was. But now you'd be afraid to do that act. You'd be afraid to offend people and what the ramifications of that would be. And it's really interesting to me what we've become and how we got there. And this movie is the turning point. This generation, this culture, when this movie was timely, it was like a turning point decade from like a hard charging, we can do better, we're going to, build a nation and everything, to we have to be afraid and watch ourselves and self-censor. A lot of self-censoring now. Mm-hmm. So I liked the movie. I thought it was really funny. And I like when people poke fun at bureaucracies, and that was done here. I especially like Buck Henry. Buck Henry was a substitute lawyer, right? So one day his lawyer, his representative, couldn't be there, and Buck Henry showed up, right? And there he is, okay? And everybody said he's really good. And he said, look, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm using 54% of my brain. I'm really smart. I know what I'm doing. And all through that day, he said nothing. The prosecutor went nuts. And he went, no response, no counter. Nah. At the end of the day, he did nothing. And that's what a bureaucrat would do for you. You hire a lawyer, they won't do anything for you.
That was another little funny aspect about the movie, was that it was a little poking fun at sort of the whole, for one, bureaucratic process of, a court proceeding, but also the fact that it was a court proceeding at all. It was poking fun at the sort of the legal system to begin with a little bit.
Yeah.
So that part was fun too as well.
The magistrates were.
Yeah, those bureaucratic aspects sort of reminded me a little bit of Beetlejuice as well, because I guess that was a joke that the heaven was just sort of or not heaven, but the afterlife was just sort of a bureaucracy.
Right.
That's a little funny, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm not sure that I got as much from the movie as you did. I did not think that. I thought it was a cute movie. I thought, it had a good message of.
It's adorable.
Yeah, it has a good message that you're gonna regret it if you let your life be ruled by fear, and that sometimes the consequence of letting your life being ruled by fear is greater than what you even feared to begin with. And not only that, but also like that love, and this is sort of the cheesy sort of romantic, romantic aspect I liked about it, but that love kind of challenges you to go past that fear. It challenges you to be vulnerable and to be uncomfortable.
But even that, from the first moment they met, they were good.
Yeah.
So he didn't have to win her love. She didn't have to win his love. And the only thing that he had to do that was a little bit proving, the only man up aspect that he had to do was at the end when they were leaving in separate buses.
Yeah.
He couldn't handle it, and he jumped out of his bus and ran to her bus.
Yeah.
And the people watching over him, they said, well, see that? He faced his fear. It was like, that was it. That was it. It wasn't exactly an Indiana Jones movie. There was no death traps or anything. And in the court scenes, at the end of the day, they would roast him, and they go, hey, you did good today. No, it doesn't matter. Go out, eat all you want, go out tonight. And
there wasn't a lot of depth to that sort of romance. They sort of just like got along very well. There wasn't a lot of trial or adversary. And basically the only trial that he had was basically just to say like, yes, I do like you. Like I do love you and stuff like
right.
Like the fear of opening up. And then
but
he
decided to say it to somebody who was the only game in town,
They didn't go through any sort of challenge or trial or anything like that besides the literal trials.
Yeah. No angst. The 90s. No angst.
Yeah. It felt like it felt very low stakes. Like and they weren't even facing oblivion. They were just going to be sent back for reincarnation.
Right.
Which is, you're not going to die. If anything, you're coming back to life. Just
he was like, okay. Right, we're sending you back to Earth.
And they have Meryl Streep for this movie, and she's sort of super underutilized. She just plays basically what any other female actress in the 90s could have played, which was basically just this girl who was in love with Albert Brooks. Albert Brooks did a good job of being very bewildered and very confused and very frustrated the entire time,
right.
Which really sells the fact that this is very disorientating. Lee Grant did a very good job of being a very sharp and prodding prosecutor, but like besides Albert Brooks, I did not feel that any of the performances were amazing, and
they weren't.
They
weren't.
And I felt that this was a cute movie that you could see in your spare time. But I felt like if you were to look for a movie that wants to push forward the narrative or message that you shouldn't let your life be ruled by fear, perhaps a 1990s comedy movie with very low stakes is not the best way to do it. So yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just wanted everybody. I wanted you to see it. I wanted to have this conversation. I had seen it twice before. I saw it when it came out, and then maybe 10 years ago or something, I remembered it, and now I thought, well, you know what? I'm trying to bring to the greater audience ideas of stuff to watch, and
you saw it more as kind of like a portrait capturing the attitude and sort of aesthetic of like the 1990s and sort of even to like the early 2000s.
It was a little time capsule.
Yeah,
it was. This doesn't exist now, and it didn't exist in the 60s or 70s, and the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there was real angst in America. Mm-hmm. People were fighting for a better life.
Yeah.
There wasn't this kind of apathy. And this kind of apathy now, it was fostered in the country, and now it's turned to nihilism. Now people are afraid. Mm-hmm. People, and it's funny that they made a thing about fear then, got to face your fear, not knowing what would come in the next 25 years, that we would have all this self-censorship now and all this safe space stuff. And, at that time, colleges were wide open to conversation about anything. They didn't even have this like an equity department or anything. You had to go in there and work real hard. And you had to do well and make the grades and everything. You couldn't get through with, an apathetic effort. And, there are people getting PhDs in Hawaiian culture.
Yeah.
Well, for heaven's sakes, what kind of application is that? What possible reason would a school even have a program like that? It's to give PhDs to people who basically don't have anything to offer, and it's really a shame. So, I don't know. Fun movie. I thought, Albert Brooks, there are schools of comedy.
Yeah.
Right? Abbott and Costello created a whole thing, and Seinfeld created a whole thing, and a lot of comedians and everything did. I thought that this was very much a Woody Allen movie. Mm-hmm. Woody Allen could have made this movie. It probably might have even been a little bit better, not to take anything from Albert Brooks because he was spot on.
Yeah.
The actors did their jobs. Rip Torn, he played his part, wasn't a great part. Meryl Streep played her part. She couldn't have been better. She was
Meryl
lovely.
Streep's part could have been filled by any other.
Sure.
Yeah, actress.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, I think she was very marketable at that time.
Yeah, no,
Probably
she was
a good deal.
She was a big name.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a little bit why I'm disappointed. She's one of the greatest actresses in like film history, and
there's an endorsement. Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know, it just felt weird to just have her do this movie.
Good movie, fun movie. You ready to rate?
Yeah, sure, I'm ready to rate.
Okay, I'll be interested to hear what you think.
I think it's a very safe movie. I think that it has a cute premise, as a cute romance. I think that it's definitely funny. It's clever and it's a little witty. I would not say it's super insightful. It's not super deep, and I do not feel that it's a must-see movie. I feel like if you have nothing better to do and you just want to see a cute movie from the 1990s,
yep, good date night movie.
Yeah, good date night movie. You could see this movie. You're not missing anything out by seeing it. I would say I would give it maybe like just a 5 out of 10. Yeah.
Okay, I'm a little bit more generous. I'm going with 8.
Okay.
Yeah, because I really did enjoy it. Shallow as it was. They don't all have to be, the man who would be king or something.
Yeah.
I mean, and they can't be. But anyway, well, thanks for watching this.
Yeah.
And usually I have something compelling to ask, like, in the comments, tell us what you think. In this particular one, don't bother with the comments. Just give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, do that. And comment-wise, unless I missed something or you have something really clever. But I can't ask for much on this one. So anyway, I'm out. I'm Fred Satilli.
I'm BJ Kang.
Thanks for watching us on The Real Generation Gap.
Thanks.